Speaker recognises the honourable member from Mount Pearl-southlands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and pleasure to be back in the House of Assembly and to have an opportunity to speak to the budget. This is, I guess we'll all have 3 opportunities at least, and this is my first one. Madam Speaker, I guess I just want to start off by saying that I want to keep my commentary here to try to be somewhat balanced and fair on it. I certainly have a lot of concerns, as has already been pointed out, but there have been some good things in the budget as well, and I think it's important that we recognise the good and the bad. So I will just say, just to start off, that I think that this whole approach of this zero-based budgeting exercise, while there are still a lot of unanswered questions, and I do thank the Minister of Finance. She did arrange a meeting, I guess, with opposition members and members from her department to try to answer some of those questions. Unfortunately, there's still an awful lot of questions that they weren't really in a position to answer in terms of where some of these savings. I think originally we had a number of 41 million, and we managed to be shown where there's $25 million that really they couldn't account for in terms of exactly where that money would be saved. And I think what we got from it is that a lot of it is ongoing actions to come. So that would certainly lead me to believe that when we looked at, for example, the flatter, leaner management process and so on that they looked at in core government departments and then Eastern Health, well, then we have agencies, boards and commissions where we haven't seen that happen. So, you know, it makes you think that perhaps that's coming, and we could see some cutbacks and layoffs there, for example. But without having that actual information given to you, it's hard to really know. So I guess when we talk about budgets and the devil being in the details, there are still a number of details which we are yet to become aware of, and I guess we will find out as time goes on. But I will say, though, that the whole concept of zero-based budgeting, you know, I think it's a good one. I think it's a good idea to be able to say, just because you spent X amount of dollars on travel last year, that automatically means you can spend the same amount this year. Perhaps you don't need to do as much travel this year as you did last year. Perhaps money that was spent on office supplies and furniture you needed last year, perhaps this year you don't have as much money. You don't need to spend as much. So therefore, why put the money there that would only get transferred over into other categories to be spent on other things, or to be spent because the year end is soon going to be up and we hear these stories about we're getting close to year end, we better spend all the money or we won't get as much next year. So I think the whole concept of starting at the zero-based and justifying every expenditure, that part of it at least, I think is a good idea, and I do support that in principle. There was some few other tidbits in there that I thought was good in the budget. There was some increased funding for early childhood educators. They're going to get an additional $1 per hour, and that's certainly a positive thing, something they've been looking for a while. I think we all agree that we need to make sure that our children are well cared for, and so this goes a long ways to helping towards that. We've seen increasing for the child care subsidy for families on lower incomes. So again, I would see that as a positive thing. We saw some new funding for student assistance in inclusive classrooms. That, I think, is an important thing. It's certainly something that all opposition members raised and have lobbied for, and I'm glad to see that that did happen. Now, I did hear commentary from the NLTA president, Jim Dinn, or I'm not sure if he's still the president or if he's past president now, but anyway, there's a transition perhaps. But he did make some commentary that while he was glad to see that announcement, it doesn't go anywhere close to making up for the issues that were created in Budget 2016 when there was a number of positions and resources cut. So he did make that commentary. I don't have the details on it. Those are his comments, not mine, but I know that there still continues to be issues in the classroom. But with that said, having some additional student assistance is better than not having them. So I will point out that I'm glad to see that. There was some new funding for transition houses there, which was a good thing. A new pilot project there to provide legal advice for victims of sexual assault. Very pleased to see that pilot project. I think it was just announced about a week or so ago, and I think it was primarily federal money. There may have been some provincial money that went with it, but in any regard, it is, I think, welcome news. I think it's a good initiative, and I was glad to see that in the budget. There was also funding put in place for a new program for energy efficiency under Newfoundland Labrador Housing. Again, that's a positive thing, although I will point out that there always was a program called the Residential Energy Efficiency Program under Newfoundland Labrador Housing, which was very similar, and that program got cancelled in last year's budget, and now we've introduced a new program. Now, it could be argued that perhaps this program is somewhat enhanced because there's not just a grants program, but there's a loans program as well, and I think even the grant may have increased slightly. So glad to see that back, and if there's some enhancements, that's a good thing. But again, you're only replacing what was removed in last year's budget. I was also pleased to see some funding for mental health, and certainly the work of the All-Party Committee on Mental Health. I think that has led to this, and glad to see there's some money set aside to start working on some of the recommendations that came out of the All-Party Committee on mental health and addictions. And I think there's some money now going towards looking at replacement of the Waterford and so on, which, again, we all know that's needed. But, that's not the same as building the Waterford. Setting money aside to move the process forward is not the same as it actually happening. Glad that they've done it, don't get me wrong, but until we actually see construction, then, we've seen on lots of projects in the past, whether it be this administration or past administrations, where, money would be set aside for studies and all this kind of stuff, and site reviews and all these things, and then it never happens. Or something gets announced, and then it gets re-announced, and 5 years later we're still announcing it, we're still studying it, but nothing ever happens. So I hope that we're serious about this, and this is not just an attempt to pacify people who are advocates for mental health to, give the suggestion that we're really going to finally do something, and that we actually don't. I hope that we do, and we'll certainly be following that as we move forward. So, as I said, these are some of the things, Madam Speaker, that were in the budget that I would view as positive things. Certainly, I can't forget as well the gas tax reduction. Glad to see that it will be reduced. I don't know why we had to wait till June to reduce it. Could have been reduced immediately when the budget was announced, but anyway, it's going to be reduced in June. Glad to see that happen. I think it's 10 cents and then an additional 4, is it, or something like that? We're not eliminating the total 16 cents, but we're eliminating 8 and 4. Is it 12 cents altogether this year? So I'm glad to see that happening for sure. But it is important to point out that really all we're doing is partially reducing something that was done last year. So, and that kind of ties into what the member for Signal Hill, Kitty Biddy, was saying. That the reality of it is that in last year's budget there were, severe measures taken by anybody's account on behalf of the government. Now, whether that was necessary or not, that's the part that's debatable. And government members and cabinet would say we actually had to do that, we had no choice. And there's other people that would say that, you didn't have to do any of it. And I think in the middle, the reality that most people would say, that I've spoken to at least, and I think my constituents would say, and I would agree 100%, that we absolutely had to do something last year. Unfortunately, there had to be some increases. It was a question of degrees. It was a question of how far it went. And that was really the issue that I had with the budget. That was the issue that my constituents had, is that they felt it went too far. What you heard from so many people, the terminology was too much, too fast. And it's important to realize that, as the the former speaker said, it was kind of being sold, the budget was kind of being sold, and a lot of people sort of bought into that idea, at least originally, as, you know, this is not a bad budget because we didn't tax you anymore. I think the Minister of Finance or other members might have said something to that effect. There are no new tax increases. That's what it was. There are no new tax increases in this budget. And everybody was really excited about that. There's no new tax increases. But you have to ask yourself, is the reason why there's no new tax increases because there's really nothing left to tax? Because last year we introduced 300 new taxes and fees and so on, and that had a severe impact on many people, and that continues today. So if this year, to simply say we didn't increase it, we didn't add any more, that's not necessarily, I mean, it's a good thing, obviously, but it's not really a good thing because you also didn't eliminate all the damage that was created in last year's budget. You didn't eliminate what you did last year. You can't pretend that last year didn't happen. And people realize that when they look at their paycheck. I've had many people say to me, you know, they looked at their paycheck and how much money that they paid in, it's way beyond what it ever was. And we've seen the impact that it's having on many people in the province. Now, some people can shoulder it more than others, without a doubt. If you are somebody who is just struggling, just barely getting by, just barely making ends meet as it is, then last year's budget and this year's continuation of that was devastating. Absolutely devastating. There are other people that were in a position to shoulder the tax and all the increases, but it has had a major impact on their lives, on their spending habits, on their expendable income, and so on. Now, are they going to the food bank? No. Although we have seen an increase in food bank use, which is very important to note. Increase in food bank use. We've seen a number of businesses shut down, and we've seen increased bankruptcies and people going into consumer protection and so on. So there's no doubt, or creditor protection. So there's no doubt that it has an impact. But there are still a lot of people that were able to suck it up, for lack of better terminology, but their spending is down. And because of their spending being down, then what are the things you cut? There's certain things you can't cut. You got to pay your mortgage. You got to pay, you know, your car, whatever, if you have one. You have to eat. You have to have heat in your home. Kids got to go to school. They need lunch, and so on. But when it comes to going out on a Friday night or a Saturday evening or something, out down to the keg or wherever you like to go, perhaps going down for a couple of drinks down on George Street if that's your thing, perhaps going to the movie, all those types of things, those are the things that get cut. Those are the extras, if you will, that get cut. And there was an awful lot of people who were forced to give up all of those things, and they're not happy about it. And the other thing is not just them, it's the impact that has on those businesses. And I've spoken to a number of business owners and so on in the bar and restaurant industry and other businesses who have told me that they have seen a tremendous drop in sales. There's no doubt about it. I spoke to a gentleman a couple of weeks ago he's a member of the Home Builders Association, and he told me that housing starts are down something like 50% from last year. He said it's like incredible. And people that do renovations on homes, like people who made a living renovating homes, that their business has dropped off substantially. And all it's really done, this guy told me, which makes sense, is that it's fueling the underground economy. More and more people, there was always people that would do it anyway, but more and more people are forced to get it done for cash. And to get it done on the cheap, get it done for cash, and then that sometimes sacrifices safety and everything else. But that's happening, And like I said, there's a lot of people just not getting those repairs done on the home, just not building that new patio deck, just not building that shed, just not, making that improvement to their cabin or whatever the case might be. They're just not doing it because the money isn't there. And that's impacting businesses, it's impacting employment, and that's why we're seeing businesses shut down, and that's why we're seeing bankruptcies and all of these other things. So, and the member from St. John's Kitty is right. Even in the budget document itself, when we look at the indicators that are there, we see unemployment is up. Unemployment is up. We see housing starts are down, household income is down. All those things are down. And these are things that we need for our economy to thrive and to grow and so on. That's what we're seeing. And so, I guess the point is, Madam Speaker, as I said, that it's not about what was done in Budget 2017. It's about what was done in 2016 and allowed to continue on in 2017. That's what's having that impact. And like I said, there's other things as well. I don't know how many people I've had call the office and that deal with seniors and so on that, were impacted very negatively by things like, when they cut the over-the-counter prescriptions, home care. You talk about the devil in the details. Talk about the devil in the details. If you read the budget last year, nowhere in the budget to talk about we're going to cut home care hours, or we're going to increase the amount that a person who receives home care is going to have to pay, that we're going to increase the amount that someone who receives home care supplies is going to have to pay. That wasn't in the budget. All that came to light 2 or 3 months later when a letter was sent out by the various healthcare authorities to their clients saying, your home care is up for renewal, by the way, so that you know. Last year you paid X, this year you're going to pay Y. We're increasing the percentage that you have to pay towards your home care. And we're reducing your hours. And you're going to have to pay more for your supplies. That wasn't in the budget. It just happened, it came out over time. And I suspect there's going to be similar things, perhaps, that may come out over time with this budget that we don't know about yet. It'll come out in dribs and drabs and so on. So, and these are the things that are important to people. The people don't necessarily, get all caught up in these big budget speeches and the big numbers and everything there. That's really not what they're focused on. They're focused on how does this budget affect my day-to-day life. That's all that matters. The rest of it, they couldn't care less. They could care less. How does this impact my day-to-day life? Do I have to pay more taxes? Will my services be reduced? How can I live? How can I pay my bills? Are the services going to be available for me if I get sick? I have a child going to school next year. Are they going to be in a safe classroom with all the resources they need, or are they going to be in an overcrowded classroom with lack of resources? Those are the things that people are concerned about. And those are the details that you don't see in a budget document. And it's hard for us, and people have said to me, how about this, how about that, how about somebody else? Some of these detailed issues. And my honest answer is I can't tell you. I can only tell you what is available today. But I can't say to you that as a result of this budget, that in 2 months' time, that this service could be taken away or reduced. I can't say that. I don't know. I don't know. So, Madam Speaker, these are the things that matter to people. And these are the things that we have to ask questions about, we have to raise concerns about, and so on. So my time is pretty much running out. I will just conclude or summarize by saying, as I did in the beginning, there were some good things in this budget, and there were some things that are not good. I'm prepared to talk about the good and the bad, both, and I think we all should be open to doing just that. I won't say the ugly, but the good and the bad for sure. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the time.